The whip came down again, and Diana Blackwood bit through her own lip to keep from screaming. She would not give them the satisfaction. Not Alpha Corwin, who stood with his arms crossed and his face twisted in disgust. Not the healer who had delivered the verdict that condemned her. Not the gathered wolves of Thornmoor Pack, the people she had called family for 23 years, who now watched her punishment with hungry eyes. "Demon carrier!" Someone spat from the crowd. The leather cracked against her bare back, and this time Diana couldn't contain the sob that tore from her throat. 7 months pregnant, her belly straining against the frozen ground where they'd forced her to kneel, and they were whipping her like a rogue caught stealing kills. The cold bit into her exposed skin almost as cruelly as the lash, Winter's teeth finding every inch of flesh they'd bared for her humiliation. "My baby," she thought desperately, her bound hands curling over the swell of her stomach. "Please, please let my baby survive this." 15, counted the wolf wielding the whip. Diana didn't know his name, one of Corwin's enforcers, young and eager to prove his loyalty by breaking a pregnant woman. "Continue," Alpha Corwin commanded. Diana lifted her head, meeting his pale eyes through the curtain of her tangled dark hair. Once, she had respected this man. Once, she had believed Thornmoor was her home, that the pack would protect her as she had protected them, hunting, fighting, bleeding for the territory she loved. She had been so terribly, naively wrong. "Please!" The word scraped out of her raw throat before she could stop it. "The pup. Whatever you believe about me, the pup is innocent." "Innocent?" Corwin stalked forward, his boots crunching in the bloody snow that had melted beneath her knees. He crouched down, gripping her chin with cruel fingers, forcing her to look at him. "The healer tasted silver in your blood, Diana. Silver. Your pup is not innocent. Your pup is an abomination, a corruption of our bloodline, proof that you spread your legs for rogues, for the mongrel scum that poison our borders. I never—" His hand cracked across her face, snapping her head to the side. Stars exploded behind her eyes, and she tasted fresh blood where she'd already bitten through her lip. "Lies," Corwin hissed. "No pure-blooded mating produces silver. Everyone knows this. You hoard yourself to rogues, and now you carry their demon spawn in your belly." He released her chin and stood, looking down at her with pure revulsion. 16 lashes remaining. Then exile. If you survive the borderlands in winter, perhaps whatever dark power you've allied with will protect you. I doubt it. The whip fell again. Diana stopped counting after 20. She stopped feeling after 25. The world narrowed to a red haze of agony, the distant sound of the crowds jeering, and the steady, precious flutter of movement in her womb. Her daughter, she was certain it was a daughter, though she couldn't explain how, was still alive, still fighting, still there. I didn't lie with rogues, she thought, the words a desperate mantra against the pain. I don't know why there's silver in her blood. I don't know what she is. But she's mine, and she's not a monster, and I will die before I let them call her one. Asterisk. The final lash fell, and Diana collapsed fully into the bloody snow. Distantly, she heard Corwin pronouncing her sentence. Exile, effective immediately, pack bonds severed, territory rights revoked. If she was found within Thornmoor borders after moonrise, she would be killed on sight. If any pack took her in, they would be considered enemies of Thornmoor. She was nothing now. No one. A ghost with a demon in her belly, cast out to die in the winter cold. Rough hands hauled her upright, and Diana forced her legs to hold her weight. She would not be dragged. She would not crawl. Whatever dignity they had left her, she would claim it. "Move," the enforcer growled, shoving her toward the tree line. Diana walked. The borderlands stretched before her in an endless expanse of white and gray, skeleton trees clawing at a sky heavy with the promise of more snow. Diana had been walking for 3 hours, or perhaps 4, or perhaps an eternity. Time had lost meaning somewhere between her third fall and her fifth. Her back was a map of fire, blood freezing in the wounds before it could drip down her legs. Her feet had gone numb an hour ago. The only warmth left in her body was the small, fierce heat of her daughter. Still moving, still fighting, still alive. Keep going, Diana told herself. One more step. One more. You can rest when you're dead, but you're not dead yet. Her wolf was silent. Had been silent since the healer's pronouncement 3 days ago, since the pack had turned on her with teeth bared and eyes blazing condemnation. The animal spirit that had been Diana's constant companion since her first shift at 13 had retreated to some deep, unreachable place, and no amount of coaxing could bring her back. Diana had never felt so alone. She stumbled over a hidden root and went down hard, barely catching herself before her belly hit the ground. Pain lanced through her palms where ice cut into skin, and she knelt there in the snow, panting, trying to find the strength to rise again. "Why bother?" whispered a treacherous voice in her mind. They were right. Something is wrong with your pup. Something is wrong with you. Maybe it would be kinder to let the cold take you both. Easier. Peaceful. Just close your eyes and let go. The baby kicked. It was a sharp, insistent kick, right beneath Diana's ribs, as if her daughter was rejecting the thought of surrender with every ounce of her tiny, impossible will. Diana pressed her hand to the spot, feeling the movement beneath her palm, and something cracked open in her chest. "Okay," she breathed, her voice a ragged whisper in the frozen air. "Okay, I hear you. I'm moving." She pushed herself upright and kept walking. The sun was setting by the time Diana realized where her feet had been carrying her. Starfall territory. The last unclaimed borderland. The kingdom pack that had risen from the ashes of the burning 3 years past. Rumors painted it as a place of ghosts and grief, led by an alpha king who had lost everything and everyone to dragonfire. Some said he'd gone mad with it. Others said he'd grown stronger, colder, more dangerous than any alpha who came before. All Diana knew was that Starfall took in strays, orphans, refugees from packs that had fallen or cast them out. If there was any place in the 5 territories that might accept a pregnant exile with silver in her blood, it was here. Or they'll kill me at the border, she thought grimly. But at least I'll have tried. The tree line thinned as she climbed higher into the mountains, the snow growing deeper, the wind more vicious. Diana's cloak, the thin, threadbare thing they'd thrown at her as they shoved her into the wild, did nothing to block the cold. Her teeth chattered so hard she thought they might crack. Every step was agony, her wounded back screaming, her legs trembling with exhaustion. She didn't see the border marker until she was almost upon it, a massive stone carved with the sigil of a falling star, half buried in a snowdrift. Starfall territory. She had made it. She was here. Diana's knees buckled. She went down slowly, almost gracefully, the last of her strength draining away like water through cupped hands. The snow embraced her, soft and deadly, and she thought distantly that it wasn't such a bad place to die. Beautiful even, with the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky above. "I'm sorry," she thought to her daughter. "I tried. I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." The baby kicked again, weaker this time, and Diana closed her eyes. She was dreaming of fire. Not the killing flames of the burning that had destroyed so many, but something gentler. A hearth fire, crackling and warm, wrapping around her like an embrace. In the dream, she was safe. In the dream, someone was holding her, and she didn't have to run anymore. Alive, but barely. Goddess, what did they do to her? The voice cut through the warmth, deep and rough, and edged with something that sounded almost like fury. Diana tried to open her eyes, but her body refused to obey. She was trapped in the space between consciousness and oblivion, aware of sounds and sensations but unable to respond. "The wounds are fresh. Whip marks." A second voice, older, female, heavy with sorrow. "She's pregnant, my king. 7 months along. Maybe more. I can see that. Hands on her face. Large, calloused, impossibly gentle. Her pack did this to her? Whipped a pregnant woman and left her to die in the snow? It appears so. There's no fresh scent mark on her. She's been cast out. A low, rumbling growl that vibrated through Diana's bones. Not threatening, protective. Furious on her behalf. Get the healers ready, my fastest horse. She's coming back to the keep with me. Your Majesty. Now, Marta. Footsteps crunching away through the snow, and then arms sliding beneath Diana's broken body, lifting her with a care that made no sense, that she had no framework to understand. She had expected death. She had prayed for it to be quick. Instead, she was being cradled against a broad chest, held like something precious, and the heat radiating from the body pressed against hers was... Diana's eyes flew open. The world was a blur of white and gray, and the deep, vivid green of eyes staring down at her. A face swam into focus, hard angles, a jaw shadowed with stubble, dark hair swept back from a high forehead. Beautiful, in a way that was almost frightening. Beautiful and dangerous, and looking at her with an intensity that stole what little breath she had left. And then the heat hit her. It flooded through her frozen limbs like liquid fire, spreading from every point where his body touched hers. Her wolf, silent for days, dormant and grieving, howled. The sound echoed through Diana's skull, joyous and desperate and absolutely certain. Mate, mate. He's ours. He's ours. We found him. Mate. Diana gasped, the shock of it slamming through her with the force of a physical blow. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. She was dying in the snow, and she was hallucinating, and there was no way the most powerful alpha on the continent was holding her in his arms while her wolf screamed recognition. But his eyes were changing. The deep green bled to molten gold, a sharp inhale expanding his chest, and a growl tore from his throat that was nothing like the protective rumble from before. This was possessive, claiming, primal. He went utterly still, nostrils flaring as he breathed her scent, and Diana watched his pupils blow wide, watched his arms tighten around her, watched his whole body shake with the effort of holding himself back. Mate. He rasped, the word torn from him like a confession, like a prayer, like something he'd stopped believing he'd ever get to say. Diana's terror tangled with desperate, impossible hope. She was broken and bleeding and carrying a baby they called demon spawn, and this man, this king, was staring at her ruined body like she was something precious, something his. Please, she whispered. And she didn't know what she was asking for. Mercy. Understanding. A reason to believe this wasn't some cruel joke the universe was playing before it let her die. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. The gentleness of it shattered something inside her. You're safe now, the Alpha King said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't try to hide. Whatever they did to you, whoever hurt you, that's over. I've got you. You're mine. And Diana Blackwood, exile and pariah and mother of a pup they called Cursed, let herself believe him. The horse moved beneath them like a living furnace, its massive body generating heat that seeped through Diana's frozen limbs. She was still cradled against the Alpha King's chest, still wrapped in his arms, still reeling from the impossible truth that her wolf had screamed into her consciousness. Mate. This man, this stranger who had found her dying in the snow, was her mate. Diana had stopped believing in fairy tales long before Thornmoor cast her out. She had stopped believing that the universe held any kindness for wolves like her, ordinary and unremarkable, and apparently cursed to carry a child with silver in her blood. Mates were stories told to pups, promises of a perfect bond that would complete you, make you whole, give you a love that transcended everything else. Real wolves rarely found them. Real wolves settled for political matches, for convenient pairings, for whatever warmth they could scrape together in a world that was mostly cold. But her wolf wouldn't stop howling. Mate, 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 mate. Shh. The Alpha King's voice rumbled through his chest, vibrating against Diana's cheek where it rested over his heart. We're almost there. Just hold on. She tried to speak, but her throat was raw from the cold and the screaming she'd done during the whipping, and the tears she couldn't stop crying now. All that came out was a broken sound, halfway between a sob and a question. His arms tightened around her. I've got you, he said again, and the words were fierce, almost desperate. I'm not letting go. The ride blurred into fragments of sensation, the steady rhythm of hooves on packed snow, the wind cutting across her exposed skin, the warmth of his body seeping into her frozen bones. Diana drifted in and out of consciousness, each time surfacing to find his eyes on her face, gold still bleeding through the green, watching her like she might disappear if he looked away. She didn't know how long they rode. Time had become unreliable, stretched and compressed in ways that made no sense. But eventually the trees gave way to cleared land, and torches blazed in the darkness ahead, and the scent of many wolves washed over her. Pack scent, territory scent. Home. Except it wasn't her home, it was his. Your Majesty, a woman's voice sharp with alarm. The healers are ready, but oh goddess, what happened to her? Thornmore happened. The Alpha King's voice was ice and fury wrapped together. Deadly calm in a way that made Diana's wolf shiver with something that wasn't fear. Her back needs treatment immediately. And the baby. She's 7 months pregnant. Maybe more. I want your best healer on her, Marta. Now. Of course, Your Majesty, but perhaps you should... I'm not leaving her. A pause. Diana felt more than saw the exchange of glances above her head, the silent communication between alpha and subordinate. As you wish, sire, this way. Diana was carried through corridors that smelled of wood smoke and herbs, past wolves who stopped and stared and whispered behind their hands. She caught fragments of their words. Dying, pregnant, exiled, and felt shame burn through the cold in her chest. She must look like a nightmare, bloody and broken and swollen with a child they would surely call cursed once they learned the truth about what ran in her veins. But the Alpha King carried her like she weighed nothing at all, his stride never faltering, his arms never loosening. He kicked open a door and strode into a room that blazed with firelight and warmth, and Diana almost wept at the heat that washed over her frozen skin. On the bed, the older woman from the border, Marta, instructed. Carefully, my king. On her side, so we can treat her back. For a moment, Diana felt his hesitation. His arms tightened fractionally, a possessive surge that made her wolf purr with satisfaction despite everything. Then he was lowering her onto soft furs that smelled of him, pine and winter wind, and something deeper. Something that called to every instinct she possessed, and pulling away, and the loss of his warmth was almost worse than the cold had been. No. The word escaped before she could stop it, her hand reaching blindly for him. He caught her fingers in his own, held them. His eyes were still gold, and this close, Diana could see the war happening behind them, the battle between instinct and control, between claiming and patience. I'm here, he said quietly. I'm not leaving. But they need to treat your wounds, Diana. She froze. How do you know my name? Something flickered across his face. Was it pain? Grief? She couldn't read him yet, didn't know the language of his expressions. You said it, he answered. In the snow, when you were fading. You said your name, and you begged for your baby's life. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble. You called her my little star. Asked the goddess to let her live even if you didn't. Diana had no memory of speaking those words. The cold had stolen so much from her, had blurred everything into a white haze of survival and failure and desperate, futile hope. But it sounded like something she would say, something she would pray, in the final moments before she stopped believing prayer could save her. "She's still moving," Diana whispered, her free hand finding her belly. "She's still alive. She's strong." The Alpha King's voice was rough, like her mother. Before Diana could respond, before she could even begin to process the weight of those words, the healers descended. There were 3 of them, 2 women and 1 man, their hands gentle but efficient as they cut away her frozen, blood-stiffened clothing and exposed the ruin of her back. Diana heard someone gasp, heard a low curse from the Alpha King that made the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "Goddess above," one of the healers breathed. They whipped her 30 times, more, and then sent her into the winter to die. "Can you heal her?" The Alpha King's voice was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that preceded violence. "Yes, Your Majesty. It will take time, and there will be scars, but she'll recover." "The baby." A pause. Diana felt hands on her belly, gentle pressure, the telltale warmth of a healer's gift probing her womb. "The baby is stressed but stable. Strong heartbeat. She's a fighter, this one." "Good." The Alpha King hadn't released Diana's hand. His thumb was moving in slow circles over her knuckles, a soothing rhythm that anchored her to consciousness even as the healer's magic began to flow into her wounds and the pain became something more manageable. "Do what you need to do. I'm staying." The healing took hours, or perhaps it only felt like hours. Diana couldn't tell anymore, couldn't track time through the haze of magic and exhaustion and the constant grounding presence of the man who wouldn't let go of her hand. The healers cleaned her wounds and closed the deepest cuts and packed the rest with poultices that smelled of yarrow and something else, something that made her think of moonlight and growing things. They fed her broth when she could sit up enough to swallow. They wrapped her in clean linen and softer furs. They checked her baby over and over, reporting every detail to the Alpha King as though he had a right to know, as though this child he'd never met was already precious to him. And through all of it, he stayed. He stayed when Diana drifted into an exhausted sleep and surfaced to find him still there, still holding her hand, still watching her with those gold-touched eyes. He stayed when the healers tried to convince him to rest. "You've been up for 2 days, Your Majesty. You need to sleep," and refused with a growl that brooked no argument. He stayed when the sun rose and turned the room to gold, and Diana finally had enough strength to really look at him. He was beautiful. Not in the soft, pretty way of the young wolves she'd grown up with in Thornmoor, but in a harder way, a way that spoke of battles and loss and survival. There were shadows under his eyes, and a scar cutting through one dark eyebrow and lines around his mouth that suggested he hadn't smiled in a long time. He looked like a man who carried the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders and bore it because no one else could. He looked exhausted. And yet, even in exhaustion, there was something dangerous about him. A coiled tension in his frame, a predator's stillness that never fully relaxed. Diana understood suddenly why the rumors called him cold, why lesser wolves whispered that the burning had broken something in him. This was not a man who showed weakness easily. The fact that he'd let her see his vulnerability, his desperate need to keep her safe, that meant something. "You should sleep," Diana said, her voice rusty from disuse. The Alpha King blinked, seeming to come back from somewhere far away. "You're awake. You're tired." A ghost of a smile flickered across his face, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "I've been more tired. How do you feel?" Diana took stock of her body. The pain was still there, a dull throb across her back. But it was manageable now. The cold had been banished, replaced by a warmth that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep inside her, and her baby was moving, active, strong, dancing beneath her heart like she was celebrating their survival. "Better," Diana admitted. Confused, grateful. She hesitated, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "The other shoe?" "The part where you tell me I can't stay." The part where your healers taste the silver in my blood and call my baby cursed. The part where you cast me back out to die. The Alpha King's expression went very still. Very carefully, he released her hand, and Diana felt the loss like a physical wound, sharp and unexpected, and stood. He walked to the window, staring out at the snow-covered mountains beyond, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the pale morning light. "What's your daughter's gift?" he asked quietly. "The silver in her blood. Do you know what it means?" Diana's heart clenched. Thornmoor's healer said it was corruption, proof that I'd lain with rogues, that my baby was demon spawn. The words tasted like ash on her tongue. I never. The only man who ever. She cut herself off, unable to continue, the memory of that single night of comfort twisting into something shameful under the weight of everything that had followed. I know. The Alpha King turned back to face her, and his eyes were soft in a way that made her chest hurt. I can smell the truth on you, Diana. You haven't been with anyone in months. Whatever created the silver in your daughter's blood, it wasn't rogues. Relief washed through her, so powerful it stole her breath. Then what? Silver-blooded pups are rare. He moved back to the bed, lowering himself into the chair he'd occupied all night with a grace that belied his size. So rare that most packs have forgotten they exist. When I was young, my mother told me stories about them. Children born with the power to channel moonlight itself, to heal wounds that couldn't be healed, to sense lies from truth. The old bloodlines called them blessed, sacred, gifts from the goddess. Diana stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. Blessed? But how? Why would my daughter? The silver gift lies dormant in certain ancient bloodlines for generations, sometimes centuries. Eric's voice was thoughtful now, as if piecing together a puzzle. It awakens only under specific circumstances, when a wolf carrying the dormant blood faces mortal danger, when their protective instinct burns so fiercely that it calls the old power forth. The healers in Thornmoor tasted the silver and assumed corruption because they've never seen the blessing manifest. But what they sensed was the gift awakening, in your daughter and in you. In me? Diana pressed a hand to her chest. But I've never. The bloodline runs through you, Diana. You carry it. Your daughter inherited it from you. Eric's voice was thoughtful. When Thornmoor put you in chains, when they raised that whip against you, your daughter's power woke first. She felt your suffering and responded. But in doing so, she awakened the dormant gift in your own blood as well. Mother and daughter, bound by silver, protecting each other. I didn't know I carried any special bloodline. Most who do don't know. The gift can skip dozens of generations. But somewhere in your ancestry, there was a silver-blessed wolf, and that power now runs in both of you. Your daughter's manifestation was stronger because she was born with it active. But make no mistake, Diana, the silver lives in your veins too. When you need it most, it will answer. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She was protecting you before she was even born. Diana pressed her hand to her belly, feeling her daughter shift beneath her palm. Not cursed, not corrupted. Blessed, and fierce enough to fight for her mother from the womb. Thornmoor called your daughter cursed because they're ignorant and afraid. Something hard entered his voice, something that reminded her of the growl he'd let loose when he saw her wounds. They whipped you and exiled you and left you to die because they didn't recognize a miracle when it grew in your womb. He leaned forward, holding her gaze with an intensity that made her wolf whimper in submission. Your daughter isn't a monster, Diana. She's precious, powerful, exactly the kind of pup a pack should cherish and protect. And she's going to be born here, in Starfall, where no one will ever call her demon spawn again. Tears were streaming down Diana's face again. She seemed to be incapable of controlling them anymore. But for the first time since the healer's pronouncement, they weren't tears of grief or shame. They were relief, pure and overwhelming, washing away the terror that had lived in her chest for weeks. Why? She managed. Why would you? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why would you? Because you're my mate. The words hung in the air between them, simple and absolute and earth-shattering. I felt it, the Alpha King continued, his voice rough. The moment I touched you in the snow, I haven't felt my wolf in 3 years, not since the burning took everything. But when I lifted you into my arms, he woke. He knew you. He claimed you before I even understood what was happening. He reached out, his fingers hovering just above her cheek, not quite touching. I've been waiting for you, Diana. I didn't know it until I found you, but I've been waiting for you my whole life. Diana's wolf was silent now, but it was a different kind of silence. Reverent, awed, complete. The howling had stopped because there was nothing left to howl for. They had found him. After everything, after the whipping and the exile and the endless frozen miles, they had found him. Eric, she whispered, finally daring to speak his name. It felt like a claiming of her own, like wrapping her tongue around something sacred. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be anyone's mate. I've been nothing but an ordinary wolf my whole life, and now you're mine. He said it simply, without arrogance or possession, just stating a fact. And I'm yours, if you'll have me. Not because of the bond, not because your wolf recognizes mine, because I'm choosing you, Diana Blackwood. I'm choosing you and your daughter and whatever future we can build together. And I'm asking you to choose me back. She should have been afraid. She should have been suspicious, guarded, protective of the fragile hope that was blooming in her chest, despite every lesson life had taught her about hoping. But looking into Eric Starfall's golden eyes, seeing the grief and determination and desperate want that he wasn't trying to hide, Diana couldn't find any fear left in her. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I choose you. The smile that transformed his face was like the sun coming out after a long winter, bright and warm and almost painful to look at directly. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers, and Diana felt the bond between them pulse with something that felt like joy. Rest now, he murmured against her temple. You're safe. You're home. And I swear on every star in the sky, I will never let anyone hurt you again. Diana closed her eyes and, for the first time in weeks, let herself truly rest. She woke in darkness. Not complete darkness. Firelight still flickered from the hearth across the room, casting dancing shadows across unfamiliar walls. But the deep darkness of full night, when even the winter moon had set and the world belonged to dreams. Diana's back ached with the memory of the whipping, but the sharp agony of the wounds themselves had faded to a dull throb. The healer's magic was working, knitting together what had been torn apart. She would scar. Marta had warned her of that. But she would live. Her daughter would live. She was alone in the bed. Panic flared before logic could catch up. He left. He changed his mind. It was all a trick. But then she saw him. Eric was sitting in the chair by the window, silhouetted against the faint starlight beyond, and he was watching her sleep. No, he wasn't watching her. He was guarding her. There was something alert in the set of his shoulders, something protective in the angle of his body, and Diana realized with a start that he had positioned himself between her and the door, between her and any threat that might try to enter. You're awake. His voice was soft, pitched not to startle her. So are you. Diana pushed herself up on one elbow, wincing as the movement pulled at her healing back. You said you'd rest. I said you'd rest. That ghost of a smile again, barely visible in the darkness. I didn't make any promises about myself. That's not... She broke off, frustration mixing with something else, something warm. You're exhausted. You've been up for... What did Marta say? 2 days? Closer to 3 now. Eric. The sound of his name on her lips seemed to affect him, his silhouette shifting, his breath catching. I can't. he admitted quietly. I close my eyes and I see you in the snow, frozen and dying, and He cut himself off, a rough exhale escaping him. I need to watch you. I need to know you're still breathing. Diana's heart cracked open a little further. This man, this powerful alpha king, was afraid to sleep because he was terrified of losing her. She had been in his life for less than a day, and already she mattered enough to break him. Then come here. The words were out before she could think better of them, before she could remember that she was broken and healing and 7 months pregnant with another man's child. But she didn't take them back. Eric went still. Diana. Not. She felt heat rush to her cheeks. I'm not. I just meant, you can rest here, next to me, where you can feel that I'm breathing. She swallowed hard. Where I can feel that you're here. For a long moment he didn't move. Diana could practically hear the war happening inside him, the mate bond pulling him toward her, his control screaming at him to keep his distance, the exhaustion dragging at his bones demanding he give in. Finally, slowly, he rose. He crossed the room in silence, his movements predator fluid even after days without sleep. When he reached the bed, he hesitated again, looking down at her with eyes that had gone more gold than green. On top of the covers, Diana said softly, Nothing has to happen. I just need you close. Something in his expression shattered, a wall coming down, a defense crumbling, and Eric sank onto the bed beside her with a sound that was almost a sob. He stretched out on his back, his hands folded over his stomach, carefully not touching her, and Diana could see the tension in every line of his body. She reached over and laced her fingers through his. The effect was immediate. Eric's whole body relaxed, the rigid set of his shoulders softening, his breath evening out. The bond hummed between them, a warm current of recognition and comfort, and Diana felt her own tension draining away. Sleep, she murmured. I'll still be here when you wake up. Promise? The vulnerability in his voice undid her completely. This was the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf on the continent, asking her, an exile, a pariah, a woman who'd been thrown away like garbage, to promise she wouldn't disappear. I promise, Diana said, and meant it with everything she had. Eric's eyes drifted closed. Within moments, his breathing had deepened into true sleep, the deep, restful sleep of someone who finally felt safe enough to let go. Diana watched him sleep until the fire burned down to embers, and when she finally drifted off herself, it was with her hand still clasped in his, and her wolf-purring contentment in her chest. The next 3 days passed in a blur of healing and discovery. Eric kept his word. He never touched her beyond hand-holding and the occasional brush of fingers against her cheek, never pushed for more than she was ready to give, never made her feel like she owed him anything for his protection. When she woke from nightmares, and she woke from nightmares often, her dreams full of whips and snow and the sound of a crowd calling her demon carrier, he was always there, his voice low and soothing, his presence an anchor. She learned that he was gentler than she'd expected, though the gentleness was hard-won, a conscious choice he made with her that he didn't make with others. She watched him in the training yards one morning, and the cold, lethal efficiency with which he moved sent chills down her spine. But it was what happened after that truly showed her the Alpha King's other face. A young warrior, barely more than a boy, had been caught stealing from the food stores. Hungry refugees had been arriving daily, and supplies were stretched thin. Eric had the thief brought before him in the courtyard, and Diana watched from the shadows of the colonnade as her mate transformed. Gone was the man who held her hand through nightmares. In his place stood something older, harder, a king forged in dragonfire and loss. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of mountains. You took food from the mouths of pups, Eric said, and the words were quiet, almost conversational. That made them worse. From mothers nursing infants, from elders too weak to hunt for themselves. The boy trembled. tears streaming down his face. "I was hungry, Your Majesty, I only—" Silence. The single word cracked like a whip. The boy flinched as if struck. "You will work the kitchens for 3 months. Every meal you serve, you will remember what you stole. Every hungry face you feed, you will think of the ones who went without because of your selfishness." Eric leaned close and his eyes blazed gold. "And if you ever steal from this pack again, I will break your hands myself. Do you understand me?" The boy collapsed to his knees, sobbing his gratitude for the mercy he'd been shown, mercy that had felt anything but merciful in the moment of its delivery. Diana understood then that both versions of Eric were real, the gentle mate and the ruthless king. He had simply chosen to show her the softer one. She learned that beneath the hard exterior of the Alpha King was a man who had lost almost everyone he loved and was terrified of losing anyone else. She learned that he hadn't smiled properly in 3 years, that the burning had taken not just his pack, but his ability to feel joy. And she learned that when he looked at her, something in his eyes came back to life, something that had been dead for a very long time. She also learned, through servants' gossip that fell silent whenever she drew near, that there was a woman in the southern reaches who had once expected to become Luna of Starfall. "Diana Valewood," Marta told her reluctantly when Diana pressed. "Lord Valewood's daughter. Beautiful as poison and twice as deadly, that one." Before the burning, there was an arrangement between the houses, a political match. She visits occasionally, sends messengers more often, always wanting to know if the king has taken a mate yet. Marta's weathered face had twisted with distaste. "She doesn't visit to help rebuild, mind you, only to circle like a vulture, waiting for him to be desperate enough to accept her terms." Diana filed the information away, a cold knot forming in her stomach. She had heard that name before, had a sense somehow that she would hear it again. "You don't have to stay in this room," he told her on the second morning, when she was strong enough to sit up without wincing. "The whole keep is open to you. You're not a prisoner here, Diana. You never were." She believed him. That was the terrifying part. She believed him, completely and absolutely, in a way she hadn't believed anyone since her parents died when she was 15. The mate bond helped, feeding her his emotions in a constant, subtle stream, but it was more than that. It was the way he looked at her, the way he spoke to her, the way he treated her not as a burden or a possession, but as a partner, an equal, someone whose opinions mattered. "I want to meet them," Diana said quietly. "Your pack. If I'm going to be here, if I'm going to be yours, they need to know me." Something flickered in Eric's eyes. Pride, maybe, or admiration. "Whenever you're ready, I'll be right beside you." On the third evening, Diana was strong enough to walk. Eric helped her down the long corridor from his chambers, their chambers now, though they hadn't discussed that explicitly, to the great hall where the pack gathered for meals. She was nervous, her free hand pressed to her belly where her daughter kicked reassuringly, but Eric's presence beside her was steadying. The hall fell silent when they entered. Diana felt every eye in the room turn to her, assessing, curious, some hostile, some uncertain. She straightened her spine despite the ache in her back, lifted her chin, and met their stares head-on. She would not cower. She would not apologize for existing. If Eric Starfall had claimed her as his mate, she would live up to that claim or die trying. "This is Diana Blackwood," Eric announced, his voice carrying across the hall with effortless authority. "She is my mate, recognized by the bond and the future mother of my heir." A ripple of shock moved through the gathered wolves. Diana heard whispers. "Mate," he said. "Mate." The king finally has a mate, and saw expressions shift from hostility to wonder to calculation. But there was something else too. Something in the way some of the wolves looked at her belly, something that made her skin prickle with unease. "The child," an older wolf spoke up, stepping forward from the crowd. He was gray-haired and weathered, his eyes hard with suspicion. "There are rumors that the child carries silver in its blood. Corruption, the mark of rogues. The temperature in the hall dropped several degrees. Eric didn't move, but something about him changed, and stillness descending over him, a predator's focus locking onto prey. Choose your next words carefully, Aldrich. I mean no disrespect, my king. But there was no apology in the old wolf's tone, and he didn't back down. You've been alone for 3 years. We all understood. But to take a pregnant exile as your mate, an exile whose child may be touched. The child is blessed. Eric's voice cut through the hall like a blade. Silver-blooded pups are gifts from the goddess, sacred and precious and powerful beyond measure. The ignorant fools in Thornmoor called it corruption because they've forgotten the old ways. I will not repeat their mistake. He stepped forward, putting himself between Diana and the gathered pack, and his eyes blazed pure gold. This pup will be born under my protection. She will be raised as my daughter, heir to Starfall, and anyone who questions her nature questions me. Is that understood? Silence. Then, one by one, the wolves of Starfall lowered their heads. Even Aldrich, his weathered face unreadable, dipped his chin in submission. The king has spoken, Marta said from somewhere in the crowd, her voice carrying clearly. Long live the king, long live his mate, long live the heir to come. The pack took up the cry, the words echoing off the stone walls, and Diana stood there with tears streaming down her face as 100 voices welcomed her home. That night, lying in their shared bed with Eric's warmth at her back and her daughter dancing beneath her heart, Diana finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found somewhere she belonged. The days that followed settled into a rhythm Diana hadn't known she craved. She woke each morning to the sound of Eric's heartbeat beneath her ear, his arm curved protectively around her swollen belly, his breath warm against her hair. He never pressed for more than she offered, never demanded the intimacy that pack law said was his right. Instead, he waited. He watched her with those golden eyes that saw too much, and he waited for her to come to him. It was maddening. It was wonderful. It was slowly, inexorably, breaking down every wall she'd built around her heart. On the 4th day, Diana ventured beyond Eric's chambers for the first time without him. Marta had invited her to the pack's healing rooms, eager to show her the stores of herbs and tinctures that kept Starfall's wolves healthy through the brutal northern winters. Diana's own knowledge of healing was limited. Thornmoor had never valued such skills in their women, but she found herself fascinated by the rows of carefully labeled jars, the bundles of dried plants hanging from the rafters, the worn leather journals filled with remedies passed down through generations. You have a healer's hands, Marta observed, watching Diana's fingers trace the edge of a mortar and pestle. Gentle, careful. The pup will be lucky to have such a mother. Diana's throat tightened. I hope so. I hope I can be... She broke off, unable to finish the thought. You will be. Marta's weathered hand covered hers, warm and reassuring. I've seen many mothers come through these rooms, child. The ones who worry about whether they'll be good enough. They're always the best ones. The sound of hoofbeats in the courtyard interrupted them. Diana moved to the window, peering down at the gates where a party of riders was approaching. A dozen wolves in traveling furs, their horses lathered despite the cold. At their head rode a woman who seemed to glow against the gray winter sky. She was beautiful, strikingly, devastatingly beautiful, with hair the color of dark honey and features so perfect they might have been carved from marble. She sat her horse like she'd been born in the saddle, her spine straight, her chin lifted with the casual arrogance of someone who had never known a moment's doubt in her life. Something cold settled in Diana's stomach. Who is that? She asked, though part of her already knew, already dreaded the answer. Marta's expression shuddered. Diana Valewood. Her father is Lord Valewood of the Southern Reaches, one of the few noble houses that still has warriors to spare. She was... The old healer hesitated. Before the burning, there was an arrangement, an understanding between the houses. She was promised to Eric. The arrangement ended when the burning took so many of our people. There was no pack left worth marrying into, she said. Bitterness crept into Marta's voice. But now that Eric has rebuilt, now that Starfall is strong again. Diana watched Diana Valewood dismount in the courtyard below, watched her sweep toward the great hall like she owned it, like she belonged there, like she was coming home to claim what had always been hers. Now she's back, Diana whispered. The daughter kicked hard against her ribs, and Diana pressed her hand to the spot, trying to soothe her, trying to soothe herself. But the cold in her stomach only grew, spreading through her veins like ice, like the snow that had nearly killed her, like the fear she'd thought she'd finally left behind. She found Eric in the great hall, already speaking with the new arrivals. Diana Valewood stood too close to him, her hand on his arm, her perfect lips curved in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was laughing at something, her head thrown back, her hair cascading over her shoulders like a river of honey. Eric, you simply must let us help, she was saying as Diana approached. Father has sent his best warriors, 100 strong, ready to defend Starfall's borders. These rogues massing in the east, you can't face them alone, not anymore. I appreciate your father's generosity. Eric's voice was carefully neutral, but Diana could sense the tension in him through the bond, a low hum of discomfort, of wariness. Though I wonder what prompted it. The southern reaches weren't so concerned with our borders 6 months ago. 6 months ago, you didn't have a mate to protect. Diana Valewood's gaze swept to Diana, and for one brief moment something flickered in those perfect eyes, something sharp and cold and hungry. Then it was gone, replaced by warmth so convincing Diana almost doubted what she'd seen. You must be the exile. I've heard so much about you. The word exile hung in the air like a blade. Diana Blackwood, Diana said, refusing to flinch. The king's mate. Of course you are. Diana Valewood's smile widened. What a remarkable story. Cast out by your own pack, left to die in the snow, and now, here you are. Luna of Starfall. It's like something out of a fairy tale. It's like something out of real life, Eric said, and his hand found Diana's, his fingers threading through hers. My mate has suffered enough. I won't have her reminded of it. Naturally. Diana Valewood inclined her head, the picture of graceful apology. Forgive me. I only meant that her resilience is admirable, truly admirable. Her eyes dropped to Diana's belly, and that cold thing flickered again, there and gone in a heartbeat. And the pup. I understand it's quite special. Diana's free hand moved to cover her daughter, an instinctive gesture of protection. She is. Silver-blooded, they say. How rare, how precious. Diana Valewood's voice was honey and poison. You must be so worried about her. About keeping her safe? About making sure nothing happens to her? Nothing will happen to her. Eric's voice had gone hard, his eyes flashing gold. I've claimed her as my heir. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Of course, Your Majesty. I would never dream of suggesting otherwise. Diana Valewood stepped back, all wounded innocence, and Diana hated how convincing she was. Hated how easily she made Eric look like the aggressor, the unreasonable one. I'm only trying to help. Father's warriors are at your disposal. We only want to see Starfall prosper. She swept away toward the guest quarters, her people trailing after her, and Diana watched her go with dread coiling in her chest. I don't trust her, she said quietly. Eric's hand tightened on hers. Neither do I, but we need her father's warriors, at least until the rogues are dealt with. The pack's numbers are still too thin. She wants something. She wants me. There was no arrogance in Eric's voice, only tired acknowledgement. She always has. The arrangement between our houses, she never wanted it ended. When I told her father there would be no marriage, that Starfall had nothing left to offer, she took it personally. She takes everything personally. She's ambitious, Diana, hungry, and she doesn't lose gracefully. Diana turned to face him, searching his golden eyes. And now you have a mate. A pregnant exile with a cursed pup. Everything she thinks should have been hers is yours. Eric cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones. Do you understand that? I don't care what she wants. I don't care what she thinks she deserves. You are my mate. Our daughter is my heir. Nothing will change that. The conviction in his voice made her chest ache, made her want to believe him with every fiber of her being. But Diana had learned hard lessons about trust, about the gap between promises and reality. Just be careful around her, she whispered. Please. I will. He pressed his forehead to hers, and the bond between them hummed with warmth, with reassurance, with the steady pulse of his devotion. And so will you. That night, Diana dreamed of fire, of screaming, of Diana Valewood's beautiful face twisted with triumph as everything Diana loved burned to ash around her. She woke gasping, drenched in sweat, and Eric was there immediately, pulling her into his arms, murmuring soothing words against her hair, his heartbeat a steady rhythm beneath her ear. Just a dream, he whispered. Just a dream, love. You're safe. I've got you. Diana pressed herself closer to him, breathing in his scent, pine and wood smoke and something uniquely him, and tried to believe it. Tried to let the warmth of the bond quiet the terror still racing through her veins. Tell me about the burning, she said quietly. Tell me what happened. Eric was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, scraped raw by memories he clearly wished he could forget. 3 years ago, the rogues came. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, more than we'd ever seen in one place. They attacked at night, when most of the pack was sleeping. They set fire to the eastern wing of the keep, drove the wolves into the courtyard and hunted them. Diana's hand found his, squeezing tightly. I lost my parents that night. My sister, my beta, my gamma, most of my warriors. By the time dawn came, there were barely 50 of us left standing. His voice cracked just slightly. I've spent 3 years rebuilding, finding survivors, training new warriors, trying to make Starfall strong enough that it can never happen again. And now the rogues are massing again. On the eastern border, where they attacked before. His arms tightened around her. That's why I can't turn away Valewood's warriors, even though I know what his daughter wants. The pack comes first. It has to. Diana understood duty, understood sacrifice, understood the weight of responsibility that pressed down on leaders' shoulders until they thought they might break. She also understood predators. And Diana Valewood was one. Diana was certain of it now. The following days were tense ones. Diana Valewood had taken up residence in the guest wing, but she seemed to be everywhere. At meals, in the training yards, walking the corridors with that perfect smile and those calculating eyes. She made herself useful in 1,000 small ways, organizing supplies and coordinating patrols and charming the pack wolves who still remembered the grand alliance that might have been. Diana watched her. Couldn't seem to stop watching her. She caught glimpses of what lay beneath the polished surface. A flash of irritation when Eric walked past without acknowledging her, a tightening around the eyes when someone mentioned Diana's pregnancy, a cold stillness that settled over her features when she thought no one was looking. But Diana Valewood was careful, so careful. She never gave Diana anything concrete, anything she could point to and say this is proof that she means us harm. Asterisk until the night Diana couldn't sleep. Her daughter was restless, kicking and squirming until Diana's entire belly seemed to ripple with movement. Eric slept deeply beside her, exhausted from 3 days of border patrols, and Diana didn't have the heart to wake him. Instead, she slipped out of bed and pulled on a robe, padding softly through the darkened corridors toward the healing rooms. Marta had shown her a tea that helped calm the pup when she got active, chamomile and something else, something that smelled of summer meadows. The healing rooms were dark and quiet, lit only by the banked embers of the fire. Diana moved carefully between the tables, searching for the right jar, her eyes slowly adjusting to the dimness. She heard voices. Diana froze, pressing herself against the wall, heart hammering. The voices were coming from the storage room at the back, two people speaking in low, urgent tones. "Understand the risk I'm taking." Diana Valewood's voice, unmistakable even at a whisper. "If anyone finds out, no one will find out." A man's voice, rough and unfamiliar. "The moonthorn is untraceable once it's prepared. The pup will sicken slowly, naturally. No one will suspect anything but Goddess's will." Diana's blood turned to ice. And the mother? The silver in her blood may protect her, may not. Either way, once the cursed whelp is gone, the king will need comfort. Need a proper mate. One who can give him healthy heirs. Diana Valewood laughed softly, the sound sending shivers down Diana's spine. "You've served me well, Kiran. When I am Luna, you'll be rewarded. Just make sure those rogues hold to their bargain. Your father's warriors won't stay forever, and if the king discovers..." "He won't. I've been patient. I've been careful. 3 years of watching him mourn. 3 years of waiting for the right moment, and now this exile thinks she can take what's mine." Diana Valewood's voice turned sharp, ugly, stripped of all its honey sweetness. "She's nothing. A broken thing that stumbled out of the snow, and that monster in her belly, that silver-touched abomination." Diana didn't hear the rest. Her hands were shaking so badly she knocked against a jar, sending it clattering to the floor, and in the sudden silence that followed, she ran. She ran through the darkened corridors with her heart in her throat and her daughter kicking desperately inside her, ran past startled guards who called out in confusion, ran until she burst through the doors of Eric's chambers and collapsed against them, gasping for breath. "Diana!" Eric was on his feet in an instant, crossing the room in 3 long strides, his hands closing around her arms. "What happened? What's wrong?" "She's going to kill our daughter." The words came out in a rush, tangled with sobs Diana couldn't hold back. "Diana Valewood, Moonthorn, she's working with the rogues. She wants me dead." Eric's eyes blazed gold in the darkness, and a growl rumbled through his chest so deep Diana felt it in her bones. "Tell me everything. Tell me exactly what you heard." Diana told him. Every word, every horrifying detail spilling out between ragged breaths until she had nothing left. When she finished, Eric's face was carved from stone, his jaw tight, his whole body vibrating with barely contained rage. "Stay here," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me." "Eric, I'm ending this, tonight." He kissed her forehead, fierce and brief, and then he was gone, striding into the darkness with murder in his eyes. Diana sank to the floor, her back against the locked door, her arms wrapped around her belly, and prayed to any goddess listening that she hadn't just sent her mate to his death. The minutes stretched into hours. Diana remained where she'd fallen, her back pressed against the heavy oak door, every muscle in her body coiled tight with terror. Her daughter had gone still inside her, as if she too sensed the danger that prowled through the night, and the silence was somehow worse than the frantic kicking had been. She strained her ears for any sound, shouts, the clash of combat, anything that might tell her what was happening in the depths of the keep. But the walls were thick, built to withstand siege and storm, and they swallowed whatever violence might be unfolding beyond them. "He's the Alpha King," she told herself, pressing her palms flat against her belly. "He's survived the burning. He's rebuilt his pack from nothing. He can handle Diana Valewood." But Diana Valewood had spoken of rogues, of bargains struck in darkness, of her father's warriors, dozens of them, scattered throughout Starfall territory like wolves in sheep's clothing. What if Eric had walked into a trap? Diana pushed herself to her feet. swaying slightly as blood rushed back into her cramped legs. The chamber felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in, the air thick and stale. She crossed to the window and pressed her forehead against the cold glass, staring out into the darkness. The courtyard below was empty. The torches guttered in their brackets, casting dancing shadows across the snow. Nothing moved. Then, a flicker of light in the healing rooms. Diana's heart stopped. The healing rooms where she'd overheard Diana Valewood's plot. The healing rooms where Marta kept all her medicines, all her herbs. The healing rooms where Moonthorn might still be hidden, waiting to be slipped into food or tea or anything Diana might consume. Another light joined the first, then another. Fire. Diana didn't think, didn't weigh the risks or count the dangers. She simply moved, wrenching open the door and plunging into the corridor beyond, her bare feet slapping against the cold stone as she ran toward the orange glow that was already brightening the darkness. The healing rooms were ablaze by the time she reached them. Flames licked up the walls and devoured the carefully organized shelves, consuming medicines and records and all of Marta's precious knowledge. The heat hit Diana like a physical force, driving her back, and she threw her arm up to shield her face as smoke billowed toward her. "Marta!" she screamed. "Is anyone in there?" A figure emerged from the flames. Not Marta. Not any of the healers Diana had come to know. Diana Valewood stepped through the fire like a demon from the old stories, her golden hair streaming behind her, her perfect features twisted with rage. Flames had caught the hem of her gown, but she didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were fixed on Diana with a hatred so pure it seemed to burn brighter than the inferno at her back. "You!" The word was a curse, a condemnation. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" Diana backed away, her hands coming up instinctively to protect her belly. "The keep is burning. People could die. Let them." Diana Valewood advanced, and Diana saw the knife in her hand, a slender blade that gleamed orange in the firelight. "Let this whole rotting pack burn to ash, without the healing rooms, without Marta's medicines. Do you know how many will sicken? How many will die when winter truly bites?" She laughed high and brittle. "And they'll blame you, the exile with cursed blood, the outsider who brought doom down upon them. Eric will never believe. Eric is dead." The words hit Diana like a blow to the chest. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at the woman before her as the world crumbled to pieces. "My father's men caught him in the courtyard," Diana Valewood continued, her voice almost gentle now, savoring each word. 12 against 1. Even an Alpha King can't survive those odds. She stepped closer, close enough that Diana could see the flames reflected in her dark eyes. "He died calling your name. Isn't that romantic?" No. The denial rose from somewhere deep inside Diana, from a place beyond thought or reason. Because she could still feel him, the bond between them humming with life, with fury, with a desperate love that death could not sever. "You're lying." Diana Valewood's smile flickered. "Am I?" "He's alive." Diana straightened, and something shifted inside her. Not fear, not anymore. Something older, fiercer. The silver in her blood that had been dormant for so long began to stir, responding to her terror for her mate, her rage at this woman who would steal everything from her. "I can feel him. Through the bond. He's alive, and he's coming for you." "The bond?" Diana Valewood laughed again, but there was an edge to it now, a note of uncertainty. "You've been mated for what, a week? You don't have a true bond. You have infatuation dressed up in wolf instinct." "I have him." Diana's voice was steady now, stronger than it had any right to be. "Body and soul, heart and blood. I have him, and you never will." Diana Valewood's face contorted with fury. "I was supposed to be Luna. I was promised. 3 years I waited. 3 years I planned. And then you stumble out of the snow and he looks at you like... She raised the knife, her hand shaking with rage. "You're nothing. A disgraced exile with a monster in your belly. How dare you take what's mine?" She lunged. Diana didn't run, didn't cower. She planted her feet and let the fear and love and fierce protective instinct surge through her, calling to the power that slept in her daughter's blood, in her own veins, in the bond that connected her to Eric Starfall across any distance. Light exploded from her skin. Silver-white radiance poured from Diana like water from a shattered dam, blinding in its intensity. Diana Valewood screamed, a high, inhuman sound of agony, and stumbled backward, the knife clattering from her fingers as she threw her arms up to shield her face. But the light found her anyway. It burned where it touched, leaving behind marks that glowed like brands, and Diana Valewood crumpled to her knees sobbing, her beautiful features marred by silver scars that would never fade. "Please," she gasped, "please, stop." Diana stood over her, one hand pressed to her belly where her daughter kicked once, twice, as if in triumph. The light dimmed, but didn't fade entirely, hovering around Diana like a protective shroud, ready to flare again at the first sign of threat. "You tried to kill my child," Diana said, and her voice didn't sound like her own anymore. It resonated with power, with the ancient authority of wolves who had run beneath Silver Moon since the world was young. "You tried to murder my mate. You would have burned this pack to ashes for spite. I just wanted... I just..." Diana Valewood looked up, tears streaming down her scarred face, and for a moment she looked almost young, almost pitiable. "I waited so long. I loved him so long. And he never even looked at me. That's not love." Diana crouched down, meeting her enemy's eyes. Love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't poison and plot and burn innocent people in their beds. You never loved Eric. You loved what he could give you. Power, status, a crown. And when he found his true mate, you couldn't bear that someone else had what you wanted. Footsteps pounded through the corridor behind her. Shouts and the clash of steel, growing closer. Diana didn't turn, didn't take her eyes off the broken woman at her feet. "Diana!" Eric's voice, rough with desperation and relief. She felt him before she saw him, the bond blazing between them, confirming what she'd known in her heart. He was alive, he was here, and he was covered in blood. She turned then, and he was there, crossing the space between them in 3 long strides, catching her in his arms and crushing her against his chest. He was shaking. She could feel the tremors running through his massive frame as he buried his face in her hair and breathed her in. "I felt it," he gasped. "The bond, it flared like nothing I've ever... I thought she'd hurt you. I thought..." "I'm all right." Diana pulled back just enough to look at him, to trace the cut on his forehead and the bruises forming along his jaw. "Are you... 12 of them?" His voice was grim, his eyes flashing gold. "They ambushed me in the courtyard. But they forgot that I am not just any alpha." He looked past her, and his face hardened to stone. "And you? What should I do with you, Diana Valewood?" Diana Valewood had curled in on herself, arms wrapped around her scarred body, tears still streaming down her face. But even now, even broken and beaten, a spark of defiance flickered in her eyes. "Kill me then," she spat. "Finish it. That's what your kind does, isn't it? The strong destroy the weak?" "No." Diana stepped forward, placing herself between Eric and his would-be murderer. She felt his surprise through the bond, his protective instinct urging him to pull her back. But she held her ground. "That's not who we are. That's not who I am." She looked at Eric, willing him to understand. "I spent months under an alpha who thought cruelty was strength, who believed that power meant the right to hurt those beneath him." She touched the scars on her back, hidden beneath her robe but never forgotten. "I won't become that. I won't let us become that." "She tried to kill you," Eric growled. "Tried to kill our daughter. And she failed, because I'm stronger than she ever understood." Diana turned back to Diana Valewood, and her voice rang with the authority she was only beginning to claim. "You are banished from Starfall territory. You will leave tonight, under guard, and you will never return." The silver marks on your face will tell everyone you meet exactly what you are. An oathbreaker, a would-be murderer, a wolf without honor. Diana Valewood's face twisted with hatred. You're nothing but rogue-touched trash, an exile playing at Luna. You think anyone will follow you? I am his mate. Diana's voice didn't waver. His Luna, the mother of his heir. And you. She leaned down, holding Diana Valewood's gaze with the silver light still dancing in her own eyes. You are banished. She looked to Eric, and he nodded once, his expression fierce with pride. You heard my Luna, he said, his alpha voice resonating through the corridor. Diana Valewood, you are exiled from Starfall Pack. Any who give you shelter will share your fate. Any who speak your name with anything but contempt will answer to me. He gestured to the guards who had gathered behind him. Take her. See her to the border. If she resists. His eyes flashed gold. Deal with her as you see fit. Diana Valewood screamed as they dragged her away, curses and threats spilling from her lips. But Diana didn't watch. She sagged against Eric's chest, suddenly exhausted, the silver light fading from her skin as the adrenaline drained away. You were magnificent, Eric murmured against her hair. My fierce, brilliant Luna. The healing rooms, Diana said weakly. The fire. Being dealt with. Marta is safe. She was with me when the attack came. We'll rebuild. We'll recover. He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. Are you hurt? The light that came from you? I've never seen anything like it. The silver. Diana pressed a hand to her belly, where her daughter had finally stilled, worn out from their shared exertion. It protected us. Protected me. Our daughter. Eric's voice was rough with emotion as he covered her hand with his own. Our silver-blessed daughter, who will be the strongest of us all. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other as the sounds of chaos gradually faded around them. The fire was being controlled. The wounded were being tended. Diana Valewood's conspirators were being rounded up and dealt with. As for the rogues who had been promised Starfall's destruction, word reached them by dawn that their patron had fallen, her plot exposed, her name cursed across the territory. They scattered back into the wild places, leaderless and afraid, and those who lingered too close to Starfall's borders found Eric's warriors waiting for them. The threat that had loomed over the pack for months dissolved like morning mist, leaving behind only the memory of what might have been. And Diana Blackwood, exile and pariah and mother of a miracle, had finally found her place. The night that followed was quiet, hushed, sacred. The pack had come together to fight the fires and tend the wounded, and now they rested, exhausted but victorious. Diana should have been sleeping too. Her body ached with fatigue, and her daughter's earlier activity had drained what little reserve she had left. But she couldn't sleep. Neither, it seemed, could Eric. They lay together in their chamber, the fire burning low in the hearth, casting soft golden light across the furs that covered them. Eric traced lazy patterns on her skin, his fingers gentle despite the violence he'd unleashed just hours before. I thought I'd lost you, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. When the bond flared like that, when I felt your fear, I thought you were dead. Diana shuddered at the memory. She claimed. I know. His arms tightened around her. But I'm here. We're both here. And she's gone. She'll never threaten you again. Diana shifted, turning in his arms so she could see his face. The firelight caught the strong lines of his jaw, the fierce devotion in his golden eyes, the small cut on his forehead that was already beginning to heal. She hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Tonight, when I faced her, I felt different. Like something was awakening inside me. Like I was finally becoming who I was meant to be. You are. Eric's voice was rough with emotion. Diana, you've been extraordinary since the moment I found you in the snow. But tonight, watching you stand there, blazing with silver light, commanding your enemy's surrender. He shook his head slowly. I have never been prouder to call someone my mate. Then make it complete. The words came out before Diana could second-guess them. Mark me, Eric. Claim me properly. I want everyone to know that I'm yours, that you're mine, that nothing can ever separate us. His breath caught. His eyes blazed gold, and she felt his wolf rise to the surface, responding to her invitation with a hunger that made her blood sing. Diana. Her name was a prayer on his lips. Are you sure? After everything tonight, you need rest. I need you. She reached up, threading her fingers through his dark hair, pulling him down until his forehead rested against hers. I've spent my whole life waiting for someone who would choose me, who would stand beside me instead of casting me out. And now I have you, and I'm not waiting another second to claim you forever. He kissed her then, soft at first, reverent, but building quickly into something fierce and consuming. His hands mapped her body with knowing touches, and she arched into him, gasping at the electricity that sparked wherever their skin met. You're everything, he breathed against her throat. The moment I scented you in the snow, I knew you were meant for me. Then take me. Diana bared her throat to him, the most vulnerable part of her offered in complete trust. Make me your Luna. Make me whole. Eric rose above her, and his eyes were pure molten gold now, his wolf fully present. She could see the restraint it cost him, the careful control that kept him gentle despite the primal need roaring through them both. This will hurt, he warned, his voice barely human. The marking. I know. Diana reached up to trace the line of his jaw, feeling the tension coiled in every muscle. I'm not afraid. Not of you. Not anymore. He bent to her throat, and she felt his breath hot against her skin, felt the scrape of his teeth at the junction of her neck and shoulder. Her heart pounded so hard she was certain he could hear it. Then he bit down. Pain lanced through her, sharp, bright, overwhelming. Diana cried out, her body arching beneath him, her fingers digging into his shoulders hard enough to bruise. But even as the pain crested, something else was flooding through the wound, something warm and golden and impossibly vast. Him. She felt Eric pour into her through the bond, felt his grief for the pack he'd lost in the burning, his loneliness in the years that followed, his desperate hope when he'd found her half dead in the snow. She felt his love, fierce and protective and all-consuming. She felt his wolf recognize her as mate, as Luna, as the other half of his soul. And beneath it all, steady as a heartbeat, she felt his absolute certainty that she was meant to be his. The pain transformed. It became heat, became pleasure, became a connection so profound that Diana couldn't tell where she ended and Eric began. She was crying, tears streaming down her face, but she was also laughing, overwhelmed by the sheer rightness of this moment. Eric withdrew his teeth, and his tongue swept across the wound, sealing it, soothing it. The bite mark tingled and burned, but it was a good burn. The kind that meant healing, that meant becoming, that marked the moment her life divided into before and after. Now you, he rasped, tilting his head to expose his own throat. Claim me, Diana. Make me yours. She surged up, her body moving on pure instinct now. She found the place where his neck met his shoulder, the mirror of where he'd marked her, and she felt her own teeth lengthen, sharpening in response to the bond's demands. Diana bit. Eric groaned, a deep, rumbling sound that she felt in her very bones. His arms came around her, crushing her against him, and through the bond she felt his surrender, his joy, his complete and utter devotion. She tasted blood on her tongue, felt the bond lock into place between them, and she knew with absolute certainty that nothing in this world or the next could ever break what they'd just forged. She released him and collapsed against his chest, trembling, weeping, laughing. Eric held her through it all, murmuring words she couldn't quite hear but felt through the bond. Mine, love, mate, forever. Mine. Diana breathed against his skin, her lips brushing the mark she'd left on his shoulder. Yours? He answered, pressing a kiss to her hair. Always. Forever. Until the moon falls from the sky and the wolves run no more. They lay tangled together as the fire burned low, as the night deepened around them, as the bond hummed and pulsed between their hearts like a living thing. Diana's daughter kicked once, gentle and content, as if she too felt the completeness that had finally settled over her parents. And for the first time since she'd fled Thornmoor in blood and shame, Diana Blackwood, Diana Starfall, now, knew what it meant to be truly, perfectly home. 2 months later, on a night when the spring moon hung full and silver in a cloudless sky, Diana brought her daughter into the world. The birth was hard. Harder than anything Diana had ever endured. Hours of labor, each contraction a wave of fire that threatened to drag her under. But Marta was there with steady hands and soothing words, and Eric was there, his fingers laced through hers, his presence an anchor in the storm of pain. When the contractions hit their peak and Diana screamed until her voice broke, she felt his strength flowing through the bond, not taking the pain away, but bearing it with her, refusing to let her suffer alone. You're doing so well, he murmured against her temple, his voice rough with emotion. So strong. Our daughter is almost here. I can't, Diana gasped, her body shuddering. Eric, I can't. You can. He held her tighter, pouring his belief through the bond. You survived Thornmoor. You survived the Borderlands. You survived Diana Valewood. This is nothing compared to what you've already conquered. She bore down again, and the silver in her blood blazed to life, not the defensive flare she'd used against her enemies, but something gentler, a warmth that spread through her core and eased the passage. Marta gasped, her eyes widening, but she didn't falter. And then, finally, blessedly, a baby's cry split the silence, high and fierce, and impossibly perfect. A daughter, Marta announced, tears streaming down her weathered face as she lifted the squalling infant. A healthy, beautiful, silver-blessed daughter. The baby's skin shimmered faintly in the candlelight, traces of that same luminescence Diana had manifested against Diana Valewood. But as Marta cleaned her and wrapped her in soft cloth, the glow settled, and she was simply a baby, red-faced, furious at being born, utterly perfect. Eric took his daughter from Marta with hands that trembled despite his warrior's strength. He crossed to Diana, lowering himself onto the edge of the bed, and laid the baby carefully in her mother's arms. Diana looked down into eyes that flashed silver gold in the candlelight, her own silver, Eric's gold, blended into something new. She has your eyes, Eric whispered, his voice cracking. The silver. And your stubbornness, Diana managed, her own tears falling freely onto the soft blanket. I could feel it, even before she was born. She's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Like her mother. Eric pressed a kiss to Diana's sweating forehead, lingering there as if he couldn't bear to pull away. Then he bent to brush his lips across their daughter's brow, and the baby's cries quieted at her father's touch, her tiny hand curling around his finger with surprising strength. Welcome to the world, little one. Your pack has been waiting for you. They named her Selena, for the silver moon that had blessed her blood, and for the stars that had guided Diana to Starfall on the worst night of her life. The following evening, Eric presented his daughter to the pack. The great hall was filled to bursting. Wolves pressed shoulder to shoulder, all craning to see the silver-blessed princess they had heard so much about. Diana stood at Eric's side, exhausted but radiant, the mating mark on her throat visible to all. Eric lifted Selena high so every wolf could see her. In the torchlight, her eyes caught the flame and reflected it back, silver and gold dancing together like moonlight on water. Behold your princess! Eric's alpha voice rang across the gathering, resonating with power and pride that made even the rafters tremble. Selena Starfall, daughter of the Alpha King and his Luna, blessed with silver and born under the watchful eye of the goddess herself. Let it be known across all territories, any who threaten this child threaten me. The pack howled, 100 voices rising as one, a sound of joy and welcome and fierce loyalty that echoed off the stone walls and rolled out into the night. Selena didn't cry at the noise. Instead, she opened her silver-gold eyes and looked, as if she understood, even at 1 day old, that these were her people, and they would die to protect her. Diana stood at Eric's side, her hand resting on the mark he'd left on her throat, and she felt the bond pulse with his pride, his love, his profound gratitude for the family they'd built together. Through that bond, she sensed something else too, the ghost of his old grief finally beginning to heal. Starfall had lost so much in the burning. But tonight, in this moment, something precious had been born from the ashes. In the weeks that followed, the pack flourished. Marta returned to her healing rooms, now rebuilt larger and stronger than before, with apprentices she was training to carry her knowledge forward. Warriors who had fled during the darker years came trickling back, drawn by rumors of the Alpha King's mercy and his Luna's impossible power. Families arrived from neighboring territories seeking safety under Starfall's banner. The pack that had nearly died in Dragonfire was reborn, stronger than it had ever been. And then came the messengers from Thornmoor. Diana was nursing Selena in their chambers when Eric entered, his expression carved from granite. She knew that look, had learned to read every micro-expression in the weeks since their mating. Something had happened, something significant. "What is it?" she asked, shifting Selena to her shoulder. "Alpha Corwin is dead." Eric's voice was flat, carefully controlled. His own pack turned on him 3 weeks after word spread of what he did to you. The enforcer who wielded the whip. Dead too, along with the healer who pronounced your daughter cursed. He crossed to the window, staring out at the mountains. Thornmoor has no Alpha now. No healer. Barely any warriors left. The wolves who opposed Corwin's cruelty have sent word begging sanctuary. They want to join Starfall. Diana's hand stilled on Selena's back. For a moment she was back in the snow, the whip falling, the crowd jeering, her baby kicking desperately beneath her heart. The old rage rose up, hot and bitter, demanding justice, demanding blood. But her daughter stirred in her arms, making a soft, contented sound, and the rage ebbed. "What do you want to do?" Eric asked, turning to face her. "They're your people. Your old pack. The decision should be yours." Diana thought of the wolves who had watched her whipping in silence, but also of the ones who had looked away, the ones who had wept, the ones who had been too afraid to speak against Corwin, but who had never believed the lies about her daughter, the ones who participated in my exile, the ones who called my daughter demon spawn. "They're not welcome here," she said slowly. "But the others, the ones who were just afraid." She looked down at Selena, at her perfect, blessed daughter who would never know what it felt like to be called cursed. They deserve a second chance. Everyone deserves a second chance. Eric's eyes softened with something that looked like awe. "You're a better person than I am." "No, I'm just tired of hatred." Diana rose, crossing to stand beside him at the window. "Thornmoor's cruelty almost destroyed me. I won't let it define me. I won't let it define our pack." He wrapped his arm around her, drawing her and Selena close. "Then we'll send word. The innocent are welcome in Starfall. The guilty can rot in whatever's left of Thornmoor." It was justice, Diana thought. Not the blood-soaked vengeance she might once have craved, but something better. Something that would let her sleep at night without nightmares. As for Diana Valewood, the last Diana had heard, she wandered the wild places between territories, marked and shunned. The silver scars Diana had left on her face proclaimed her crimes to every wolf she encountered. No pack would shelter her, no merchant would trade with her. She was a ghost, stripped of name and status and future, surviving on scraps at the edges of civilization. Some might call it mercy that Diana had spared her life, but watching her enemy endure the same exile she had inflicted on others, that was a poetic justice that satisfied something deep in Diana's soul. The months turned, and summer came to Starfall in a blaze of wildflowers and warm wind. Selena grew quickly, her silver-gold eyes bright with curiosity, her tiny hands reaching for everything within grasp. She laughed for the first time on a morning when sunlight streamed through the windows, and the sound was so pure and joyful that Diana wept. Eric found her in the nursery that evening, holding their sleeping daughter and watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and rose. "Happy?" he murmured, wrapping his arms around them both from behind. Diana leaned into his warmth, feeling the steady pulse of the bond between them, stronger now than it had been on their mating night, deepened by shared joy and shared struggle, and the profound, ordinary miracle of building a life together. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the whipping, the exile, the endless frozen walk that should have killed her. She thought of the snow embracing her like a grave, and the golden-eyed stranger who had lifted her from death and given her everything she'd never dared to dream of. "Yes," she said simply, tilting her head back to meet his gaze. Her voice was steady now, certain in a way it had never been before. "I'm home." Eric pressed a kiss to her temple, then bent to do the same to their daughter. Selena stirred, her small mouth curving into what might have been a smile, and the last light of the sun caught her eyes, silver and gold, like the moon and stars that had guided her mother to safety. Outside, the pack was settling in for the night, wolves finding their dens, families gathering around hearth fires, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting up to the window. This was what Diana had fought for, what she had nearly died for, what she would protect with every breath in her body for as long as she lived. Not just survival, not just safety, family. And she would never be alone again.